Hey, we made it to book 2. The status quo is gone. Blackjack's technically a Reaper. P21 doesn't want to kill her anymore. Everyone's having a good time. So to balance everything out, of course Morning Glory gets some suffering. Fun fact, this story is so long it's hard to remember every little detail from the top of your head. There's not exactly a concise yet detailed summary I can read that will refresh me either. The closest I have is a page on tvtropes.org. It's lovingly crafted, appropriately long, and written with a sense of humor you just won't get on a standard wiki. Case in point, the page for recursive fanfiction has a list of franchises with subarticles listing recursive fanfiction for that particular franchise, and the contents of that list are just MLP. I know fan content pretty much always eclipses the source material in sheer scope, but this is ridiculous. This cartoon horseshow has enough fanfiction of its fanfiction for them to have entire genres. God, I love the internet. Anyway, Morning Glory, Suffering, Anguish, Torment, Character Development. Thesaurus.com is a godsend. Chapter 17 is all about the rubble of the previous chapter's final battle and picking up the pieces. This includes Glory's emotional state, which is absolutely in pieces. I forgot to talk about it last time, but Operative Lighthooves, the same guy that gave the order to brand Glory, forged a confession of Glory declaring her status as a Dashite and condemning the Enclave as part of a political play to force Glory's father out of power by grinding his family's reputation into the dirt. Once the confession hits the Enclave, Glory's older sister Dusk sets out to kill her and clear the family name. Pegasi are birds of a feather, very family-oriented, so this is a pretty big deal for Glory. Of course, since Glory is with Blackjack during Dusk's assassination attempt, Dusk fails and is forced to give Glory a choice: fake her death or die for real. And I'm sure Dusk would have loved to stay and debate with Glory, but this is right in the middle of the fight with Deus, so she leaves Glory in the rain with an impossible choice and an artillery shell flying at her face. It's not until after the battle and the start of Book 2 that we actually see her make the choice. Blackjack tries to convince her to choose door number 3 and ignore Dusk, but the issue is a lot more personal to Glory, so she decides Morning Glory must die. The team's medic and energy weapon specialist is now called Fallen Glory. To be honest, I think the renaming thing is kinda dumb, but you only have so much to work with when every character's name is some kind of noun. When using the dead name trope, there's only so well it can work in this universe. I suppose it helps in her mind to separate Morning Glory and Fallen Glory as separate entities to cope with losing her entire identity by replacing it with something new. This theme of identity shows up later, so we'll talk about it more then. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but I can't help it. This story develops its themes through establishment and callbacks so often and so well. That's why I think the insane length actually works here while it doesn't in World's Conquest. That story was only long because it was stuffed with more fluff than Winnie the Pooh. There are so many story arcs that ultimately mean nothing to the overarching story. It puts Kingdom Hearts to shame. Here, every single paragraph contributes something. The actual words, pages, and chapters are exactly as long as the story behind them. It is an incredibly well-paced 77-course meal as opposed to 221 cheese platters. And speaking of, I forgot to talk about everyone's favorite candy cane cactus introduced back in chapter 14, which is a real shame because her build-up is a fantastically done slow burn character development. It just doesn't pay off until chapter 17 when she deadlifts a tank. Let's back up a little. Rampage is introduced as a Deus Ex Machina, not that one, for Blackjack when she gets attacked by Leo of the Zodiac clan, one of the many bounty hunters after her head. From the get-go, we basically know nothing about her. She is a high-level Reaper, she's incredibly strong, and has an amazing character design. Full steel plate armor covered head to hoof with razor-sharp spikes, an off-white coat with red stripes like bloody scars, and a tail tangled with razor wire. Everything you need to know is expressed through her design. She is truly deserving of the name Rampage. Other than that, nothing. Complete mystery. She follows Blackjack for reasons unknown after slaughtering nearly a dozen fully armed bounty hunters in the most brutal way possible. She's forthcoming with a lot of information, with the notable exception being her own past. The only thing we need to know is that she's interested in keeping Blackjack alive, and Blackjack, half dead with a laser through the chest and a circulatory system about to explode, isn't really in a position to argue. In Flank we see her combat abilities tested against more gang members, but she's off doing her own thing most of the time. It's not until chapter 17 that we see just how she's able to stand on the same level as Deus and Gorgon with the physiology of a normal pony. Oh, and content warming. Hey honey, could you warm up the content for me? Oh, and content warning, any fight scene with Rampage is basically a very detailed lesson in equine anatomy with very explicit statistics on how much blood is in those funky little quadrupeds. In the fight against an automated tank, she gets blown up by a missile, melting half her face and breaking most of her bones, gets up, runs through minigun fire, tears the tank in half with her bare hooves, and survives being crushed by said tank. She regenerates through it all. This is more than your standard healing factor, this is complete immortality, and Rampage is the perfect lens to see just how hellish it would be. After healing from that earlier ordeal, Blackjack started pushing for answers and got a lot more than she bargained for. Most of it's oddly mundane. She woke up in a radioactive crater one day and got sold into slavery by a band of ghouls. She broke out, went to chapel, and lived with priests for a spell before leaving, killing the previous Rampage, and becoming a Reaper. But the most important part of her speech is this.
I want to fucking die, Blackjack. You've been out in the wasteland for a couple of weeks. I've been staring it in the face for years, and it's not getting better. The hoof is a meat grinder. Ponies keep coming and they keep dying. It's getting worse. The poison spreads a little more every day, and one day, if I don't die, I think I'm gonna be the last living thing in the stinking corpse of Equestria.
This is probably the heaviest Rampage gets. In most scenes, she's comic relief, saying something inappropriate or doing crazy stuff for the heck of it. Immortality is a great fit for slapstick after all. But there are a good couple of instances throughout the story where the mask comes off, and we get to see the unbridled cynicism 60 years in the wasteland will give a person. Even rarer, that mask will come off as well, and we get to see what Rampage truly is. Shrek. She has layers is what I'm trying to say. It's almost as if each layer is an entirely different character, hint hint nudge nudge, and even that's one of her main conflicts. She's terrified that she's a hollow onion, that there's no soul at the center of it all, no tangible quality that is undeniably Rampage. God, I'm really jumping the gun on talking about this before even touching on the list of suffering trademarked. Let's get into that before we fall too deep into the Rampage hole. Not like that, you sickos. Chapter 16. Talk to P21 about how she beat his lover to death in front of him, failed to mercy kill another unicorn begging for death. Yeah, I know this is technically a part of book 1, but I had to put it somewhere for the sake of consistency. Ran across the slaver mother she spared while she was being raped by a former slave of hers, and is unable to kill said slave. Okay, full stop here. What kind of sick moral dilemma is this? Remember in Fallout 3 when you had to decide whether to burn a sentient tree alive? In New Vegas where you had to make an impossible choice between 4 deeply flawed systems of government? In Fallout 4 where you have to decide whether to never mind. Another major theme in Project Horizons is second chances. Blackjack isn't an executioner and upholds that mantra to the best of her ability. It all comes back to when she got Scoodle killed. Blackjack blames herself for this, as she should, and nearly ends it all there, thinking herself unable to live with the guilt. But then Watcher comes along and delivers possibly the most iconic line from the entire story when Blackjack asks him how she can possibly go on.
You do everything you can to make up for it, knowing that you'll never succeed in getting rid of the guilt. You devote yourself to spending every second trying to do better despite the fact that it will never be enough. And you pray with every single good act you do that somehow when your life is over, that your lifetime will come close to making up for the wrong you committed.
Blackjack gives the villains a second chance because in a way she is one. She did something horrible, and because of it she spends the rest of her life trying to do better. If she didn't give others the same choice, she'd be a massive hypocrite. But in the end, that's really all she can do, give them a choice. She can't make them do anything more than that. This comes back to bite her when Rose, the slaver with a child from back in Chapter 8, is captured and raped by Frisk, one of her slaves. Blackjack gave both of these characters chances to do better. Rose took it. Frisk didn't. In the end, Blackjack is able to save Rose and asks her if she'd like her to kill Frisk. She says yes, but Blackjack can't do it. Even if he is scum in pony form, she still can't bring herself to kill another person that isn't actively trying to kill her. The text leaves it ambiguous whether this is a virtue or not, and I'd like to keep it that way as well. Morality is somewhat moot in a world where nobody deserves anything. Things happen, consequences for those things happen, and that's all there is to it. People can make their choices accordingly and decide for themselves what they think is good and just in a world where those things didn't exist until chemicals became self-aware. Chapter 18. Fought an undead swordsman and lost enough blood to pass out after walking for 5 minutes. Chapter 19. Watched as Rampage kills a foal with her bare hooves. Chapter 20. Dug a grave for said foal with her bare hooves. God, these 2 chapters are just completely fucked from the word go. Rampage, for all her murderous tendencies, has always shown a soft spot for children. She was a founding member of the Crusaders, she got along great with Rose's child, Thorn, and the only criteria for whether Frisk deserved to die she cared about was whether he hurt Thorn. Then, just 2 chapters later, she crushes Thorn in her arms, whispering assurances about mercy. Fuck. This is what I meant about layers. Rampage has more than a few personalities living inside her that come out during certain triggers. The most dangerous of these is the Angel of Death, a serial killer from before the war who was obsessed with murdering suffering foes under the pretense of mercy. So to sum it all up, Rampage has a condition that causes her to kill the people most precious to her when they need her the most. On a more clinical note, we also see the extent of her regenerative abilities. She's able to recover from complete disintegration from Glory's beam rifle with the exclusion of a talisman lodged deep within her gut. This chapter messed me up. The story is so dense, with every other chapter being a wham chapter. It just keeps one-upping itself in both emotional and physical intensity. One chapter they're facing off against a mutant Medusa masonry, the next they're being forced out of town after once again refusing to be an executioner, then right back to cyborg demon bounty hunter battles, then it hits you with an exchange of words that'll hit you harder than any artillery shell ever will. This story is anything but a one-trick pony. Thank you, I'll be here all week. Chapter 21. Had an entire boat fall on her. Foreshadowing. Chapter 22. Oh boy, this one's a doozy. In Chapter 22, she A. found her home was infected with the cannibal raider plague. B. watched her closest friends try and eat her and was forced to kill a few of them. C. forced to eat Rampage's regenerating heart. D. watched as a few uninfected stable ponies slowly go insane as the plague spreads. E. ultimately forced to kill her entire stable with poison gas. F. tries to die with her stable, but is teleported out at the last moment. G. oh, and she had to watch as everyone in Stable 99 suffocates slowly. That's the long and short of it, but there's a lot of little things that happen in this chapter that come back to haunt Blackjack for the rest of her life. The chapter literally opens with her mother's head on a pike mounted near the entrance to 99, and it only gets worse from there. This one chapter is about as emotionally saturated as it gets until the finale. It's a freaking full salvo of some of the strongest emotional beats Project Horizons has to offer. It is a Richter 9.0 earthquake wham chapter with an even stronger aftershock. This chapter hurt me, and I love it for that. This chapter is 22,000 words of pain that I can't get enough of. Need I remind you what piece of media I'm talking about? My Little Pony. Head on a pike. Friendship is magic. Vengeful slaughter of your entire community. How the fuck do you write a story with these two elements that should mix about as well as Cyberpunk 2077 and the PlayStation 4? How could any story still maintain even a semblance of authenticity after mixing pastel pink ponies and so much explicitness it makes Game of Thrones look like Dora the Explorer? Bad example and stupid question because Somber nailed it harder than a carpenter with a super sledge. He played it straight from the word go and wrote an honest-to-God post-apocalyptic adventure, but with ponies. From the first chapter, you're neck-deep in lore, world building, and history so dense you're left with no other choice than to just roll with it. Suspend disbelief and read what is written, not what you expect to be there. This mentality is really put to the test when this chapter kicks off with goddamn poetry buffering the paragraphs of detached, melancholy slaughter. It's left a bit vague, but I think the poetry is coming from the dealer. The dealer is a nebulous entity. Remember when Blackjack got past beer by freaking hallucinations? She was talking about the dealer. And it's very hard to define just what they are because they could be a lot of things all at the same time, and it's very hard to tell what they are in a specific instance. He's a hallucination, a soul bound to a megaspell, and a spirit of the wasteland all at once. Whatever they are, they love messing with Blackjack. Cryptic symbolism is the dealer's entire deal. Remember to tip your waitress. Whenever he shows up, he says something ominous to Blackjack, deals a few cards with their friends' faces on them, and goes away. They tend to push Blackjack in a new direction by providing a new perspective on certain situations. Basically, they're a backseat gamer whose ideas tend to only reveal how terrible Blackjack's life is, rather than actively make it worse. And that's exactly what he does later in the chapter, but for now, Blackjack is staring her problems straight in the face and doesn't need a reminder, so the dealer's noticeably absent in the first half. After the numb battle scene that kicks it all off, she awakens to a bullet being pulled out of her skull, and a twinge of hope being reinstated. Not all of 99 was infected. They come up with a plan and save the stable, getting traumatized all over again every step of the way. Blackjack is forced to eat Rampage's heart. P21 gets raped by the Overmare and strangles her with his handcuffs. Blackjack has a final duel with Daisy while she's gloating about her plans for the cannibal army she's suddenly found herself in command of. Blackjack's party even comes in when all hope seems lost, and they deliver a badass monologue about friendship. Every non-infected pony lived, every raider died. Stable operations resume, she gets to sleep in a real bed for once. Glory tries and succeeds to make the most lecherous pony in the wasteland feel better, and confesses her feelings that have been building up for 20 chapters at this point. She even gets her hooves on a unique named weapon that's been passed down from security chief to security chief, and has their names engraved on it, including hers and her mother's. They faced trial and tribulation, they paid the price 1,000 times, and ultimately came out on top. Even as I'm describing it to you, dear viewer, it feels wrong, doesn't it? Well, you're not the only one. A very similar thing happened when Blackjack defeated Deus back in Flank. The battle, the victory, even the indulgence that followed. You know what happened after that, though? Alienation. When someone comes to your town and blows up a cyborg known far and wide as the strongest thing in the wasteland, the natural reaction isn't thankfulness, reverence, or even relief. It's fear. The citizens of Flank interpreted what Blackjack did as a show of power, soon to be followed by a hostile takeover, which is almost what she did. She shored up the town's defenses, cozied up to the mayor, and generally made everyone know that she was very invested in Flank's well-being. They treated her with cautious optimism, not kindness. kind of like hoping a spider finds its way out of your room on its own, even if it killed a bunch of flies for you. This mirrors the ending of Fallout 1 quite well, and 99 mirrors it even better, being the vault the protagonists belonged to before their experiences in the waste left them too altered for life to truly return to normal.
Only through the bravery of this vault dweller was the evil destroyed. But in so doing, he lost many of his friends and suffered greatly, sacrificing much of himself to save the world. When at last he returned to the home he had fought so hard to protect, he was cast out. Exiled. In confronting that which they feared, he had become something else in their eyes, and no longer their champion.
Midnight makes it pretty clear that the overarching reason they want Blackjack to leave is because she's a reminder of the horrible events that occurred there, and if she remains, their life of not thinking about it is over. So when Blackjack told them to burn the bodies outside, of course they didn't think about it. They did what they always did and recycled them. Blackjack finds out about this on patrol and is able to save the only uninfected stable dweller in 99, on account of working non-stop to keep the recyclers from exploding. She told her to wait by the stable doors, gathered the party, and did what had to be done. With a twist. She locked the doors, blew up the controls, but with her still on the inside. What happened afterwards was half heroic self-sacrifice, half selfish suicide attempt. She went ahead with the plan to gas the stable, and it hits exactly as hard as it needs to. It's not drawn out. The entire sequence lasts only a little over 500 words. The opening fight scene lasts over 2,000, but the end hits harder than it ever could. At this point, every card has been played. There's no need for expositional embellishments, intricate imagery, or massive monologue. It's just Blackjack, watching her home die, and hoping she dies with it. Chapter 23 spends 20,000 words trying to commit suicide. Chapter 23 is when Blackjack hits the despair event horizon in the form of a literal horizon with a gun pressed beneath her chin. That's actually what the chapter opens on. It's a flash forward, but still. Anyway, Blackjack gets teleported out and spasms from pain, guilt, and involuntary gasping, so she gets put under into a memory orb, and for being such an important and frequently used plot device, I haven't talked about it nearly as much as I probably should have. That's because pretty much every memory orb contributes to the B story of Project Horizons, Macintosh's Marauders. In K-Cat's original, Big Mac died in the war and acted as Applejack's motivation to begin the Steel Ranger project. Somber took his minor role and expanded it so much that it might as well be its own story. Here and there we see memory orbs chronicling the Marauders' rise and fall. Blackjack is enraptured in their story, and honestly so am I. Each orb is a new puzzle piece that answers one question and brings up another. It would totally work as an entirely separate story, seeing as every event takes place prior to Project Horizons in the timeline, but the events influence the present quite often. I think these segments are genius, as they break up the present sequence of events on top of being well-written, funny, heartfelt, and relevant, since every single character, except for Macintosh himself, comes back in one way or another, and there's even a reason for this that makes sense, but that doesn't come up for a long while. Now, it's at this point that I think it'd be best if I got a bit more personal, so I want to make one thing perfectly clear. You don't know me. I'm a voice on the internet. Got it, Pally? That being said, this voice on the internet can draw an uncomfortable amount of parallels between Chapter 23 and their own experiences. The dismissals of concern, the crippling guilt, the screaming. Oh my god, the screaming. Blackjack hates herself in a scarily realistic way, eating away at her bit by bit, hollowing out the spaces where happy memories are supposed to go. That feeling never goes away. Does the name Scoodle bring back any memories? Now I hope you understand just how weighty the simple admission of "this chapter messed me up" can be, as well as how cosmically cathartic it is to see how Blackjack finds a way to go on. She's able to talk to Homage, who shows her broadcasts of every settlement she's saved. The dealer shows up, ever the voice of reason, countering every point of Blackjack's self-loathing rhetoric. She sees the stars through a tiny break in the cloud cover and asks whoever might be beyond them to give her something that can make her bear this. And fate answers in the form of a passing sprite bot. Watcher, the only soul to see the end of the world with their own eyes, who's been staring the wasteland in the face even longer than Rampage has, gives her exactly what she needs. A reason to hope. Gardens of Equestria. And if that ain't how you do a callback, I don't know what is. Geez, that got heavy, didn't it? This one chapter means more to me than I could ever put into words, so sorry if I got a bit dramatic. Once a theater kid, always a theater kid. Full disclosure, this one took a lot out of me, so we'll finish book 2 next time. There's a long way yet to go, and the road only gets brighter from here. Notice I said brighter, not easier.